Right now, we're ready to seed some cells, and so that's what I'm going to do the second part here. So I'm actually going to seed 2 flasks of cells. We're going to compare 2 methods. One method, I'm just going to seed the cells directly in there without doing any centrifuging to get rid of the cryo medium. And the other cells I'm going to do with centrifuging. We'll just see the difference in how they grow. Okay, so I'm going to go get the cells from the minus 80-degree freezer now. That's one thing I got to do when I get out. So back here at the minus 80-degree freezer, I just put the cells I retrieved from liquid nitrogen in here. And now, you can store cells in an 80-degree freezer for several months at a time, not for years at a time is usually what you don't want to do. So what I got to do is thaw these. So I'm going to go ahead and stick them in the water bath. I do want to make sure they thaw. I want to be quick about it, right? So I'm going to give them a chance to thaw. While they're thawing, I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the protocol, which was to go ahead and add some media into these flasks. Right, and the reason we put media in the flasks early is so that the cells actually have something to attach to when they get in there, right? So what happens is proteins from the media will absorb onto the bottom of the flask, and that's what the cells actually attach to, right? So one of these flasks, I'm going to add, now I tightened it too tight, and here's one of the mistakes you can get yourself in trouble in. I'm going to add 10 mils of media, like I said in the protocol. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, right? So I'm not going to mess around with it too much. You'll be very careful about the flask. The inside of the flask is what we want to make sure stays very sterile. Okay, swish around to make sure the whole bottom is covered. Now I'm going to go ahead and label this while we're at it. So we know there's a 3T3 cells, T133 from 6/3/2017, and it just so happens to be 6/3/2020 when I'm seeding these. I'm going to say these are the centrifuged. Okay, I'm just going to kind of put this out of the way. You got to be careful not to get that filter wet with media. So this other one, I'm going to put a little bit more media in, like 13, 14 mLs. Be very careful not to suck too much liquid in and get to hit the filter. And the reason is I'm not going to add as much liquid when I add just the cells. I'm just going to add 1 more mil to this one. On that one, I'm going to add like another 4 or 5 mils. That's why I have a different amount on each one. So again, I'll label them. 3T. Sometimes this has hard time writing. P133 from 6/3/2017. My initials, the current date, and these are not centrifuged. Okay. The other thing is we're going to put our cells in some media here to centrifuge them, so I'll go ahead and add some media there. I think I said I'm going to add 7 mils to that. So I get about 7 mils there. And let's see if our cells are thawed yet, because we are about ready. Yeah, so in that short time it took, these cells are thawed, which is good. Go ahead and spray everything down. Cells in there. Spray my hands down. Okay, so I'm going to do the easy one first, where I'm just going to take some of the cell suspension and stick it into, so there should be 1,000 microliters of cell suspension. I'm going to stick it into this flask here, which is, I'm calling the non-centrifuge cells. Try to close that. All right, so this is where you got to be really tricky not to hit that tap. So I don't really care about what's in this vial afterwards. That's why I just throw the cap on the ground. I'm going to kind of suck it up and down a little bit. I do want to not get too many air bubbles in here. I do want a good mix and make sure there's not cells just sitting on the bottom of that cryo vial. I want to suck them all up if possible. Okay, so I'll shoot the cells in there. And go and just dispose of the tip perfectly right in there. And now I'm going to kind of mix these around, right? I want to make sure the cells get fairly evenly spread over the bottom of the T75 flask. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to go ahead and get those cells and put them into this for centrifuging. Again, I'm very careful what I'm doing with my tip. I'm not really careful what I'm doing with the cap because I don't really care about the cap. All right, going to mix those pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and stick this in here. Now I'm going to mix it into the media pretty good too. Make sure I wash out that whole pipetter tip. Okay, so now these things are ready to centrifuge. So I'll go ahead and get that started. We know it's going to take 5 minutes. I already have this thing set. 200 G for 5 minutes is what we're going to do. So there's a switch over here to open it. I want to make sure I balance this. So again, I have about 8 and 8. Okay, so we will put those on opposite sides of the centrifuge so that it's balanced. You got to make sure everything is correctly opposite because sometimes these things can get rotated too. Okay, so I'll go ahead and close, hit the play button, and it will start doing it. Okay, so now I have a 5-minute wait time while we wait for the centrifuge, so I might as well start cleaning up stuff, right? Start cleaning up what I don't need. This is a great time to do that. So I'll go ahead and get these in here. Right, this would be a good time to just, like, I'm starting to accumulate a lot of waste here. I could go ahead and dump that if I wanted to. You know, I'm not going to worry too much about that now. I'm going to put this one back. But I'm going to start getting some of these other things out. Right, so number one, the cells that we already seeded, let's go ahead and put those things in an incubator. So because I just came out of the biological safety cabinet, this thing is pretty much as clean as it's going to be, right, on the outside. So I don't really need to spray it before going on the incubator. I just want to make sure I don't touch, like, put my hands in there too far. That are touching other things outside. So I'll just go ahead and do this. Stick in the incubator. Make sure this thing is closed and locked. Make sure that door gets closed. Okay, I'm going to spray my hands so I can start cleaning up some of this other stuff. Okay, so some of these things, like I'm going to put all these into the fridge. I'll do that afterwards so you don't have to watch. The PBS I'll get out. So I'll do that afterwards so you don't have to watch in video. Okay, while we're waiting, the other thing I want to show you is that we are using Sigma DMEM with high glucose, with L-glutamine and sodium pyruvate. We're using Corning DPBS. I'm also thawing out some of the other reagents so I can aliquot them out for later. So when we use trypsin, we haven't used that today, but it'll be high clone version of trypsin. We are using Sigma brand bovine calf serum, and we're using high clone pen strep. So those are all the particular brands and things that we're using for cell culture. Okay, so we're almost done centrifuging. Time's going to run out. It's going to spin down for us. Okay, and it says it's over, so we're good. Hit stop just to make sure. I can use this lever on the side to open things up. So I'm going to be a little bit gentle here. So here's the balance, counterbalance. I don't want to disturb my cell pellet. So you can see it's a very small, maybe you can see, it's a very small pellet of cells at the bottom, that whiteness. And so we don't want to disturb that. So I'm going to be kind of careful putting it back in here. Go ahead and spray it. Spray my own hands. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to aspirate out all the liquid off the top of these cells. I'm going to resuspend them in pure DMEM and then go ahead and add to the flask. So aspirating out, we're using one of these 2 ml aspirating flasks. Okay, I'm going to get our aspirating hose all out and ready. So these are things you need to make sure you have ready so that it's not going to be a disaster when you need it to be. You can see I could have knocked that over. That would have been bad. So I need to make sure things are not going to do that. Keep the flask out of the way there. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put a 200 microliter tip on the end of that aspirator hose just to slow down the flow rate a little bit. So I'm going to use my foot pedal to turn the aspirator on. I'm going to suck up one of these tips. And then I'm going to be careful with this cap, right? So this is one of the things where I am going to use this cap again. What I'm going to do, though, is move this way off to the side where I'm not going to disturb it. Again, I like to leave caps kind of straight up where I don't go over the top of it and it's just getting pure air from the ceiling. So the first thing, if I had any bubbles, this is where you would suck off the bubbles off the top first, just to make sure that all your bubbles are gone. Okay, I'm going to keep sucking down. As I get closer and closer to that bottom, I don't want to lose any cells. So I'm going to tilt as much as I can. I'm going to stop right there. If I leave just a little bit of media, for this purpose, it's fine. Other times, if you're like resuspending these in hydrogels or something, you're going to be even more careful because you don't want to leave much media at all. Okay, I'll put the cap back on. We're done with our aspirating, so I can turn that off. Put this in here. And now I'm going to resuspend in 5 mils of media. This you also have to be a little bit careful about because you don't want to introduce too many bubbles here because that is not healthy for the cells either. So again, I don't need to get perfectly 5 mils, I'll just get close. And now I don't really care about the cap at all, so I'll just let that fall off the edge. And what I'm going to do first is bring it close down there. I'm going to kind of give it a good jolt to make sure those cells get off the bottom. Okay, then I'm going to suck it up again. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to spray it down the side, trying not to make bubbles as much as possible. Right? You got to be careful. You do not want to make too many bubbles by blowing air in there. Right? Doing this too many times actually will start to shear the cells and make them unhappy. So I want to do enough where I break up that pellet and so the cells aren't clumped together. I don't want to do it so much that I've sheared the cells to death and they're really unhappy with me. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, aspirate that out. Again, I don't care what's going on in there because we're throwing that away. But I do care what's going on in here. We want to keep this environment sterile, so I'm going to be especially careful. Spray it in. Okay, now I'm going to mix this around just like I did the other, being careful not to get the lid wet. Just to make sure the cells get a chance to cover all the parts of the T75 flask. Throw this away, put this in the incubator. All right, so we're almost done. It's just a matter of cleaning up the cell culture area. Spray my hands again. You don't want to introduce anything in there that we don't have to introduce in here. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is I'll take out my trash. That's fairly easy. dump it in the biohazard, because all that was biohazard trash. I'm going to go ahead and spray this down, and I'm going to put it back inside our cell culture cabinet. Okay, these things I said I'm going to take away and put in the fridge. You don't need to see me doing that. That's fairly easy to do. The thing I do want to show you is we need to clean out this hose. You see there's even some media stuck in there from aspirating, so I want to make sure this stuff all gets cleaned out. I also need to replace, several of my pipette tips. So normally the 50s would be up there, but I have the camera up there so we can get dual angles, so I just keep the features down here. I want to make sure I keep the cabinet stocked so that next time I come in here, I'm not like, oh crap, I ran out, now I got to go back and get some. So let's clean this out. And so what I'm going to do is get another 50 ml tube. I'm going to do like 10% bleach. So these are supposed to have 10% bleach. However, these are probably made pretty long ago, so I'm not sure the quality of this 10% bleach. So what I'm going to do is end up dumping this out. I'm going to go ahead and make some more 10% bleach. Down here, there's some bleach. And you're like, okay, how do you make 10% bleach? Well, this is 100%, and this thing is about there, so I probably want to fill it about that much with bleach and the rest with water. Okay, so I'm not real exact on the 10%. It's more like an educated guess of what 10% might be. Okay, and here I can actually measure if I wanted just 5 mils of bleach and get up to 50 in water. Okay, so that's how you go ahead and make 10% bleach so that you know what you have. And what we're going to want to do is aspirate this bleach into that aspirating line. So I'm going to go ahead and spray things down first. This is very simple. Turn on and just start sucking up the bleach. And I'm going to make sure it gets all down there. Okay, good. So we've cleaned out the hose. Everything now in our trap down here is bleached as well, so that's good news. So I can take my trap. So this was just bleach. These are polypropylene tubes, so they can be recycled. That's okay to do because they had no contact with cells. Again, this already has a lot of bleach, but I'm not sure how much, so I'm going to make sure I add some more 10% bleach in here. To make sure this thing gets cleaned out nice and good. Put this all back together. Alright, so as I said, we just need to clean up. I'm going to spray this whole thing down. Again, it's going to really help with all those. You can see all the places I dropped some media from before. It just really helps clean it. I'm also going to spray the outside here where I was breathing. Especially with COVID-19, nobody wants to be breathing the same thing that I am. So I'm going to rub these down. And then this outside as well, just to make sure it all gets wet, it all gets some ethanol on it, and gets sterilized. All right, so good job. That's our first day of cell culture.